Hey, welcome back to the Hometown Hustle, you guys, and I am super excited to bring you today's guest. This person is one of the main people who inspired this entire podcast. If you followed us for any length of time, you know that our desire is to bring you the most incredible people who do the most incredible things within our Grants Pass and Southern Oregon communities. And today you're going to hear from Steve Roe, who is the owner of Roe Motors. But more than that, Steve might be one of the most compassionate people I have ever met and is an inspiration to everyone. Today we talk about Steve's love for his community and his passion for giving back. Plus, he also tells us a gut-wrenching story about the time that he and his wife were robbed at gunpoint in their own home. And then we talk deeply about mental health, suicide, and some of the ways that we as people can help one another. I hope you guys tune in for this one because Steve is an incredible person and we can all learn a lot from him. Check it out. Hi, Steve.
Hello there.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Welcome.
Well, I have a lot of respect for you. I went into my mentor's office a couple years ago, probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, and she suggested that I reach out to you and connect, and we met for lunch and just learned a lot about you, and since then I've learned a lot more. And I'm just really excited to have you on here because you are one of the biggest champions of our community, and I just think that's awesome. Funny thing is, I don't know if you noticed or saw it, but we recorded something a couple weeks ago, and Dan made a joke about car salesmen. And
I did hear that.
You did hear that. And so it's funny is that one of our first guests is a car salesman of all things. But it's really interesting because you're not even close to what that stereotypical car salesman kind of mentality is, but or stigma is, but it's it's funny nonetheless. So welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Give us you're obviously Steve Roe.
Mm-hmm. I passed the first test.
Right. And you own Roe Motors here in town, which is a GMC Cadillac dealership. But above
Buick.
all, what's that?
Buick.
Oh, Buick,
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. So I bought.
Actually, Buick GMC, we no longer have Cadillac.
Oh, is that right?
Right.
Oh,
we gave that up about maybe a year ago.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. Set the record straight.
You bet.
No more Cadillacs in Grants Pass.
We have used Cadillacs and that type of thing, but yeah.
Of course. Yeah. No, I bought my last car from you, and I know Lawton did also. So he's got the big GMC Denali XL. The thing's like a boat. So he has.
Love that car.
He has two boats. And hit
a deer with it. Like the second month I had it, did great. Never saw the deer again, but the car withstood the hit and everybody was safe. That's why we have a big car.
I sure hope any car would withstand a hit from a deer. Maybe not Robin's car, but no. Robin drives a Toyota Yaris, and the thing is about as big as this coffee mug. So,
a car can be, a deer can mess up a car pretty good. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel. We had a lady hit a beaver the other day. That was a new one.
You had an insurance claim where a lady hit a beaver?
Yeah.
She had a duck game?
not that kind of beaver.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, off track.
No, that's okay. No, but no, I don't know where I was going with, but with the car dealership stuff, but I enjoyed my experience. Amy Fox, one of your salespeople, is just an awesome individual. I met her through Chamber of Commerce, and when I had the opportunity to buy a car, I wanted to buy it from Amy. So,
well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah. So, how long have you owned the dealership?
Well, that's a family dealership.
Okay.
We moved here from Michigan in 1983, and so we've been here ever since. And my dad started the dealership. I was 27 when we came here, and been here ever since. And he passed away in 2019, and so my sister and I have the dealership now.
Yeah. I heard your dad was an amazing human being.
Truly. I mean, everything I've learned from my dad. It's really neat. You say you can't choose your parents, but I was lucky and fortunate to have two great parents.
Yeah.
And, Dad was just this person that's community all the way, a great individual, never knew a stranger.
Yeah.
He would come up to people and just the stories of true compassion. He would do things that, just a quick story. In 2019, he was in the hospital in the last few days, and this lady came in the showroom. She says, "Is Mr. Roe here?" I said, "No, he's actually in the hospital right now." And she says, "Well, I'd like to tell him a story." And I says, "You know what? I'll pass the story on to him." And she says, "Yeah, I was at Cartwright's meet about 2 years ago, and we were in the line, and he came. We're standing waiting to pay, and he made the comment to me, 'You smoke, don't you?' He says, I can smell it in your clothes." He says, "Have you ever thought about quitting smoking?" And I would never say that.
Yeah.
And he's, but he had a way of saying that with genuine concern. And she says, "You know what?" She says, "I thought about it, and I quit smoking because of that." And she says, "I came in here, and this was 2 years later, and I came in to say thank you for that conversation."
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Holy moly. I would never get away with something like that. I'd get smacked.
Punched out, exactly. Yeah, right. But he would pick up conversations with people, and you learn so much from him. And when you sat down, he'd say, "Well, you go sit at that table and I'll sit at this table, and we'll learn twice as much," rather than talking to each other. And we still talk to each other as a family and that type of thing. But he was always about learning. He was just curious about everything.
Where did that mindset from him come from? I mean,
he grew up in a farm in South Dakota, and then he went to General Motors Institute, and he worked for Buick. Then he went to work for a couple dealerships, and then he bought this dealership in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan in 1967 with very little experience. And I would say, if you ask Dad today, had that opportunity, he would say, and it's the same thing true with me, it's not about the dealership, it's about the community. And the community, it's giving back to the community. And he would be, in Sault Ste. Marie, they get more snow than any place in the United States. I mean, that is the reason we're not there, because it's so much work. But he would plow this. He had at that time we had 3 dump trucks, we had an end loader, we had a Chevy truck with a plow, and a Jeep with a front and a back plow. And this Jeep only had 2 seats in it, and so there was 4 kids in the family, and we would take turns riding with Dad up and down the streets, and he would literally plow Ashman Street, which was the main street in Sault Ste. Marie, both sides.
wow.
And that was just his way of giving back.
Yeah. Wow. And I mean, obviously I don't know if you inherited a lot of those traits, but I'm sure that's where your desire to help the community comes from.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. No, I would have loved to meet him.
Yeah. He's a great individual. He's a great dad, a great human being. And his legacy still lives on with me and with our employees too. And with our customers. Customers come in still to this day and say, your dad, he came up just all the time where he'd see things. And the interesting thing about my dad is the projects that he started. There was one in Moline, Illinois, which was a Niabi Zoo. He started that zoo. And in Sault Ste. Marie, he started the I-500 snowmobile race. And then he has the Josephine County tree plant. And then he's over on the coast. There's a condo over there that our family has. And he's got it's the Ross Row Trail. And he built the trail from after he retired from the beach to the top of the condo.
Wow.
And it's signed that way today. The signs are there. So he just loved to give back.
Yeah. One of the plant a tree thing, I think, is especially cool. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that works and why he did it?
He was always about planting trees. He never really got involved in, the cutting of the trees or but he just believed in helping students understand the appreciation of why you should plant a tree today. And so he started planting trees, and it's 25 years ago. And now these trees are big. And he always made sure they had tags with the student's name on them, and so the students could go out later and find their tree.
Yeah. I just think that's so cool. We have a mutual friend, Doug Tripp, who was involved in that program, and he's a professional arborist now. I mean, he owns Siskiyou Tree Experts, and that's what he does. And he talks about that, like that was like an inspiring thing for him, was planting that tree, and that he has a crazy love for trees. If you hear this guy talk, I mean, he can be like, "Oh yeah, that's a blah 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 blah," and it's infested with this kind of bug, and if you don't do this, it's not gonna, And he just has this insane knowledge of trees. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. He's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to trees. I didn't realize that's why he got into it.
Well, I'm not sure if that's. I remember him talking
part
specifically
of
about
it,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I would imagine
It
that
planted
had,
a seed, literally,
sure.
just like it planted a seed of a tree. It's
Yeah.
planted a seed for a career.
yeah,
Absolutely.
it's inspiration.
And it
So,
still goes on even after he's gone today. Still, we didn't do it during COVID, but it's been renamed the Ross Roe Tree Plant now.
yeah, no, I just think that's way cool.
I have a question about your dad and you, because I really value my dad. He's one of my mentors, who I bought the business from and all that. So some similarities. But when I first started off, I was always trying to be my dad, because I thought that's how it worked. That was my only example. And over time, I figured out, I need to be my own guy, take the best traits, leave some, whatever. Just wondering, seems like your dad was also a big personality and people really looked up to him. How have you worked through becoming your own businessman and man in the community?
Dad was more about the community. I'm more about the business side of things. So I'm more involved in board of directors of local nonprofits as well as the business. And so the business side of things, Dad was more about community. And he was involved in the business. But, Dad never paid any attention to a balance sheet, income statement, and so that's kind of where my role came in. And so I'm kind of a blend between Dad of the business side as well as the community side, and both are necessary. And he always respected me for that.
Can't say the same for your dad.
No, thanks.
The guy opens his balance sheet every morning, probably.
Yeah,
Still.
Yeah. That's just interesting because that's something I've gone through.
Love you, Lance, if you're watching.
He won't watch.
He won't watch.
That's something I've gone through my whole, I've been doing it for 6 years, but just interesting coming from another family business where you have that perspective. I was just wondering how you felt about it. So
We got along great. We saw eye to eye on things, about things that really, really mattered. And I learned so much from him.
Yeah. What nonprofit boards are you a part of that you're willing to share, I guess? Are you allowed? Can you do that?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. There's no top secrets there.
Okay.
Sante, I was on the board for about 24 years. I'm currently on the finance committee for Asante, and different roles there. Was chair of the board. Just recently joined the board of Mercy Flights out of Medford. Friends of Southern Oregon Hospice on that board. Been involved in Road Gateway Rotary, the Rotary work for years. And I'm on the board of a university in India, in Hyderabad.
Wow. Yeah, I forgot. You have some ties to India, too. We talked about that in the past. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I went to India in, 2015. And what an amazing culture that is.
Yeah. I've been there 5 times now.
Yeah. A lot of people talk bad about that, about India in general. And just, because it is, let's be honest, it's a dirty country in the cities and stuff like that. But the people couldn't be nicer.
Exactly. They'd give you the shirt off their back, and
Right.
that might be the only shirt they own,
Right.
but they would still give you the shirt off their back.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible culture, and anybody who ever has the chance to go to India, I highly suggest it. It is so cool.
It's a gift that just keeps giving over the years. And so we now participate in classes with students remotely.
Yeah.
Because of COVID. So I haven't been there since 2019, I guess was the last year I was there.
Yeah, and they got hit pretty hard.
They still are affected by it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
it's still there.
I don't even know if I can explain how many people are there's a billion people in that country, and it's a third the size of ours.
Right.
Unless you're really rural, there are people stacked on people. COVID is the worst thing that could ever happen to India.
Yes.
Like a social distancing in India is not possible.
Right. And their healthcare is not fantastic.
Right.
There are places that, and there are some places in India that have, well, I shouldn't say places, but people have extreme wealth there. Mm-hmm. But it's a minority by far. Poverty is so much more in place there.
Yeah. That's it's interesting that the medical is not something that is, I don't know, as prominent as it is in our country or other countries with, the brilliant people. Some of the smartest IT people in the entire world come from India.
Right.
There's some really smart people there. So it's kind of just interesting that there isn't more, but
there's just so many people to serve though.
Yeah.
When you have that, I think it's 1.3 billion people And Hyderabad is the sixth largest city in India, and it has, I think, 8 million people in it. And so it's just, to drive across town, it's an all-day process.
It's a chore,
and
for
plus
sure.
traffic is, such a nightmare. And they don't use turn signals.
Lanes.
It's just
Lights.
You can't
Signs.
until you've experienced it. It's crazy.
So I'll tell you a quick story. I think I may have told you this story. So we were in India on like a tour trip. Like they had us on a bus, and they would take us to these different places, and they'd get us off, and we had a guide and all this kind of stuff. And so we're on this bus, and we're going down this highway. And the hotel is across the other side of the oncoming traffic. But if he was to pass by the hotel and like do a U-turn and come back, he'd have to go down the road maybe like 5 miles or something. It like wasn't a big deal. And so the bus driver, a tour bus sized bus driver, just went over the median and started driving in oncoming traffic for like a mile because there was a barricade in the middle of the road. He like took a space in the barricade and drove in oncoming traffic for a couple miles and then turned left into the hotel. And it was like a no big deal. Like people just started moving, and it was just normal. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like
I don't know how the insurance works there, but so many people don't have cars there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, every car has a ding on it, because if you like bump, it's like bumper cars. If you bump somebody in traffic, unless it's like somebody gets hurt, like they just keep driving.
Right.
Yeah, just like
You don't stop.
yeah, you just keep going. Yeah. So, anyways, got off on a tangent on India. Can you imagine? Maybe that's where you should open up your next branch office.
I'd be broke in a minute, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's probably why they don't have insurance. The claims would be outrageous.
What do the police officers do? They just like, unless someone gets hurt, the same thing? They're not worried?
Well, they stand up in the middle of the streets and they'll direct traffic, but they really don't get that involved. But traffic direction is a big part of their job. And it goes all different places.
It's too crowded, so you can't speed, probably.
Right.
Yeah, our tour guide, we asked about law enforcement, and they were just like, well, there's not really. They don't play as big a role in India as they do here. So they're just like, meh. So he had some other weird things to say, but I can't remember exactly what it was, and I'm not sure I'm in the place to do it. But yeah, no, that's really cool.
And then the other thing, in addition to board work, is I enjoy the direct one-on-one work. So, for example, hospice work, the Oregon Youth Authority. In place I primarily work with is a therapy dog bear.
Yeah, I thought you were going to bring your dog with you.
I thought about it, but I thought she might become a little nuisance, that type of thing. So I left her back. She's at work today, so she's in the kennel right now with the other dog.
Yeah, you had 3 at one point, didn't you?
We lost all 3 during COVID, not of COVID.
Okay, because I remember when I bought my car, it was February of 2020, before the shit hit the fan.
Yeah.
So
right.
it's and I remember talking to you about I think you had just gotten your newest puppy, or a new puppy at that
Right,
point.
yes.
Yeah. What's her name?
Actually, Hope is
Hope. Yeah, that's right.
Finn
Yeah.
is the other one. And so Finn was the first one, and then Hope.
Yeah. And so you take those around to hospice and the hospitals and
Schools.
Library.
Yes. Library. Yep.
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 yeah.
The canine reading buddies is a great thing for little kids to go in and the pet dogs and read to the dogs.
Yeah. And your King Charles are just beautiful dogs.
Yes, they really are. Thank you.
Yeah. Why King Charles?
I first came across the breed. My sister got one, and I thought, this is a cool dog. And in southern Michigan, there was recently a school shooting, maybe a year ago. In the sheriff's department, they looked at different kinds of therapy dogs. They're called comfort dogs, not therapy dogs. But they actually they're getting 10 of them, and they're getting 2 more now, and they're actually using them with their school resource officers. Oh. But if you go back to the days of King Charles III is on the throne right now. King Charles II, which is in the 1600s, wanted this breed of dog that was basically a lap dog. And so that dog sits in the lap, and it's known as a high maintenance dog, because when you get a King Charles, your days of going to the restroom are over. They're going with you all the time. Wherever you go, they just if you want to stress out a King Charles, you put them in a room by themselves and say, forget it. And they just want to be around people all the time.
I don't have King Charles, and my dogs do that with my wife all the time. Give her such a hard time. They're like, they're with you everywhere.
So the same thing. So
Yeah.
and they're size-wise. If I go to visit the hospital, I visit the pediatrics departments at Rogue Regional. This is all pre-COVID. I haven't been able to go because of COVID. It hasn't opened up yet. But the behavioral health unit, pediatrics, and stroke rehab. And so in the pediatrics, a lot of the youth, they can't have any infection, so they can't visit there because of the spread of infection. Behavioral health, many of those individuals have not been able to bring their pets in with them during their treatment for behavioral health issues, and so they pet the dog, and there's a lot of tears shed. And then in stroke rehab, we put a brush, and so it's actually part of their therapy, and they brush the long hair of the King Charles, and it's just to get them used to the stroke, part of the rehabilitation of being able to use that hand with the brush. Mm-hmm. So it serves a therapy purpose in more ways than one, in addition to the dog itself. Of the emotional side, it's also the physical side that they get to practice using the brush with the dog.
Wow. When did you come up with this idea or come across the idea of the comfort dog or the therapy dog?
It's been about maybe 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. So the dogs I've had are all, passed on, obviously, but got this dog and I said, I want to have a therapy dog. Mm-hmm. Didn't even know what it was at first. I started checking it out more, and it was something that, it's going to work.
Yeah. No, I just think it's very cool. It's very admirable. Robin and I were talking yesterday about, I always thought it would be fun to go to the pediatric unit dressed up as superheroes. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that would be really cool, just to dress up as Superman or Robin, Batman and Robin.
My sister-in-law, who I'm in the business with, she has a daughter, Lindsay, and Lindsay, when she was 14, Lindsay's 26 now. When she was 14, she was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, and she spent 9 months up at OHSU at Dornbeckers. And they have those type of the things, the youth that are there, and there's a little bit of that are Rogue, and the new women and children's on the addition that's being built on right now. You're gonna have more opportunities for things like that. I think you might get your dream if you want to do it.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't look very good in a spandex suit at the moment, so we'll just keep that one on lock for a while.
Hulk.
I could be the Hulk. Well, I need to get a lot bigger then too.
Yeah,
So
well, they make the padded.
Right.
Yeah.
That bus may have left the station.
yeah, that's right on you. Yeah, no more spandex suits for you, huh, Robin?
Probably not.
Retired.
Yeah.
One of the things I think when it comes to giving is to find that thing that you're passionate about for giving. And for some people, it's writing a check. For some people, it's serving on a board. And other people, it's direct service.
Yeah.
And there's probably other ways around that, but that's the ways I think of when I talk about giving back. Mm-hmm. I think that's a responsibility. And the interesting part about the giving back is I get back many more times of what I give.
Right.
In giving back. For example, when you see the smile of a child, and you just have these, the thing about a dog is it takes all the stress out of the conversation, because you just put the dog on the person's lap and talk about it. Mm-hmm. There was a youth at the Oregon Youth Authority, and this was about in 2019, Christmas. It was a Christmas. And so I took Molly down to the Oregon Youth Authority behind Walmart, and we were sitting there, and
it's a good place for a prison, by the way. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. All right, no bags on Walmart. Sorry, get back to that. Molly, back down to the Oregon Youth Authority. Sorry.
Yeah, and so I took her in there, and this was a Christmas party, and so my wife Christy was also a big part of my life, obviously, and my giving back. But we were hosting this Christmas party for the youth, and I noticed that in the back area they have a person. It's more than a timeout room, because it's basically a cement slab, and this young man, about 12, 13 years old, was in there. And I said, what happens? And he says, well, he got in a fight. And so he can't participate tonight in the Christmas party. So I said, could I go talk to him? And I said, sure. So I took Molly in there, and I started talking to him. And I said, would you like to hold him? And hold her? And he says, yeah. And started talking, and I learned he was from the Portland area. And this was his first Christmas alone. His parents' car had broken down, and they were not able to be with Chris. He's not able to come down and see him at Christmas. Mm-hmm. And I talked for probably 45 minutes. And after he calmed down and that kind of stuff, and So I went out afterwards to get ready for the Christmas party. And I says, you kind of calm down. Would you let's let him see how he does. And he came out, and he was a model youth for the whole rest of the evening. Well, the story doesn't end there. I couldn't go to the Oregon Youth Authority because of COVID, during the COVID times, but it's recently opened up in the past 3-4 months. And so I went in this unit, and I took Hope with me. And Hope is a tricolor, so Molly's a blend of brown and white, so a totally different look to the dog. And this youth came up to me, and he says, "You probably don't remember me, do you?" And I says, "No." And he says, "Well, I've been here about 3 years now." And he says, "I was that person in the back there." And he says, "I just want to tell you how much that meant to me."
Oh, wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And I'm...
I don't know if I could do it. I'd just be crying the whole time.
And a lot that he came up, and he says, "I'm doing a lot better right now." He says, there's a Newbridge High School there. Many people don't know that Newbridge is a school there. It's a county school. And he says, "I'm getting ready to graduate." And he says, "I'm really doing well." And I says, "Congratulations on that," because they really do a marvelous job of not putting the youth in there, throwing the key away, but the residual of chances of a student coming out of there and a youth being a success is quite high.
Yeah. It's, I love hearing that. It reminds me, obviously you had a very traumatic event happen to you within the last year. And I remember it was in the paper, and I'd like for you to tell the story if that's okay.
Sure.
But I remember I called you because I saw it in the paper and I heard the story, and I just called you just to, see how you're doing and all that. And what you told me really kind of surprised me. And well, it doesn't surprise me coming from you, but it's just not a typical response. After what happened to you, you said that, that you didn't have any animosity toward him. You were more curious. Like you wanted to just sit down and talk to him about why he did what he did and what made him get to this point in his life and all that kind of stuff. And going back to the Oregon Youth Authority thing, and we talked about this when we were on the phone too. It's an interesting, you talk about passions. Like one of the things that I'm super passionate about is the youth in the community. And it's where I prefer the direct service kind stuff. I'm on boards and stuff, but I prefer the direct service stuff. And I try to do a lot of my time with the youth stuff. And it's come up in conversation before that, we spend all these time on these troubled youth or these homeless kids or kids that had grown up in these households. It's not their fault. And then maybe they go to OYA or they turn 18. When does it change that we stop caring about the people, or that we stop, because when they're kids, they're like, oh, they don't have a choice, but they turn 18 and they become adults, and it's like they make these mistakes, and it's like, oh, you're going to jail, you're a scumbag, that kind of stuff. It's just interesting. Where does that happen? That there's a gap there. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. I participated in what they call the sanctuary training at Rogue Regional in the mental health area, behavioral health unit. And the statement that I took away from that thing is, when looking at a person, is not asking what's wrong with that person, but asking the question, what happened to that person? And it really changes everything, the way you look at things, when you say, what happened to that person? And usually there's a story there. And, one caring person can make the difference in a person's life. Right. And that person, people say, well, I'm not a leader. Everybody can be a leader. You can lead at any level. Doesn't make a difference at what level you lead at. Any of us can make a difference in caring for another person.
Right. Yeah. That's what happened to that person, not what's wrong with that person. That's it.
Yeah.
That's a nugget for sure. Go into that a little bit about what happened, the event, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What happens? How did it all start? And
well, my wife and I were home. It was June 12th this year, and it was a Sunday evening, and I was actually folding Porch Fest brochures in the living room. And Christy, my wife, she said, "Did you hear the car in the driveway?" And I says, "No." And I look out there, and I says, "There's no car there." And I says, "Okay, well," and we went back to sitting in the living room. And then it was about maybe a minute or two later, we heard a crash. And at the base of our driveway, it's a long hill, we thought and there's been numerous crashes there before. And so we go out on the deck to check to see, do we need to call 911? Does somebody need medical help? And looked out and this car crashed, and this guy's coming up the driveway. But the thing we noticed immediately, he was carrying a sawed-off shotgun with him. And that's the only thing he had in his hands was a sawed-off shotgun. And, of course, at that time, then just immediately your brain just becomes like a supercomputer. And it's just, what are you going to do now? Because you know that somebody carries a shotgun with you. It's probably not going to end well. And so we were up on the deck looking out over him. And he says, we had two trucks in the driveway. One was Christy's truck, was my truck. And it's a Blue Canyon, which is a shop truck. It's got Roe Motors all over the side of it. But if you look at them in the tailgates, it's the only thing you could see. And they both look like GMC Canyons. And so he came up the driveway, and he says, I want the truck. And we could look down, and we could see this crashed car at the base of the driveway. We knew that was the issue, did not know the whole story behind it, because we were looking at it only from that particular vantage point. And so he got to the base of the driveway, and he said, I want the blue truck. And then I'm thinking, okay, Christy was on the left, I was on the right, and we're kind of deciding, okay. And then all of a sudden, this big blast goes off, and I can still picture the flash of light with the muzzle of the barrel of the shotgun, and heard this. I did not hear anything where the slug landed, which will go in just a second, but we heard the shotgun blast, and my ears rang for an hour afterwards. It was loud. And so I says, okay, I'm going to get the keys. But what I was afraid of, and I probably was slow in leaving, because I was afraid of leaving Christy on the deck. Because I go in the house to find the keys. And in our house, we're not probably the most organized with our keys. I don't know, it's
Who is?
Okay.
Yeah.
Where they put those keys? It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And it could be numerous places. And but I found the keys relatively quickly. And so in the meantime, he had come up on our deck and walked in the house past Christy. And I threw the keys to him. And he was carrying the shotgun. And he grabbed the keys and he drove off. And we have two dogs, which we talked about. And they were both just ran out. Hope wanted to go with the guy. And
So it looks like you need some comfort, pal. I'm coming with you.
So and he drove off in the truck. And I went inside, obviously, and called 911 right there. And the neighbor had called in. And I did not know this. In our story, you only hear part of the story because you don't know what's happening in the rest of the part. Right. So it turns out that the car that he had was wrecked in our driveway we were the third one that he'd stolen. So that was a stolen car in our driveway. And it says Roe Motors all up the side of it. So he says, what's the license plate number? I said, I don't know the license plate number. You don't need it. Just look for Roe Motors. It's all over the side of that truck. Yeah. You can't miss it.
Yeah.
And so but the neighbor had called in and said, there's been a shooting at the house above us. I don't know what's going on, but I heard somebody say, don't shoot.
Yeah.
And that was Christy. And Christy was so calm throughout, and we both were, but I mean, she was so calm throughout the whole process, and I was really proud of her, and it just happened so quickly. I mean, this whole thing probably was done in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't think it took that long.
Yeah.
And since then, you replay your event literally millions of times. What would you have done differently? And I don't think I'd do a lot differently.
Yeah.
Got more cameras at the house, more lighting, but that wouldn't have changed anything. Yep. It's just a case of being at the wrong place at the wrong time. And it turns out, they haven't convicted the person, but there's a lot of trauma from other people, from us, and the police reached out to us afterwards, the next day actually, and suggested, how you doing? I says, great, no big deal. He says, okay. He says, but he says, you might need some help. And he says, if you do, call me. And he says, I'll find some help for you. And I says, we're doing okay. And he says, I've been with the police department for 32 years. And he says, it's never happened to me. And I says, okay. And so that weekend, that was on a Sunday. And the weekend, I called him back on that following Monday and just says, you know what, I'm not doing so well. And neither is Christy. And so I reached out for a person of talent and helps with trauma. And was really a big success for us. And just the image is still there. He's not been convicted. He's in jail, and I don't know if it'll go to trial, and it's just going through the legal process.
Right. But you had said to me, do you remember what it was that you said exactly? You said that you would just like the opportunity to talk to him.
I've written his. I think he's going to go to trial. He's going to accept a statement, and so when he does, and I've attended every hearings on Zoom that has happened, and the court has really been good about letting me know. And so it was actually 1:30 on Tuesday, and they felt he was going to plead at that time. And if he pleads, the judge would say, okay, you've got X amount of years, because it would be a part of a plea agreement. And so I already have my victim's agreement or victim statement written out.
Right.
And it's different than most people's victim statement.
I would imagine.
And it's just because of the fact, people say, I want to spend, just give me 5 minutes with that guy in the room. And I would like to spend 5 minutes with that guy in the room, but not to tear him apart, but to say, okay, what happened to you?
Right.
Because I've learned later, he's 42 years old, and he spent 17 years in prison already. And this is the one I have no reason to think, they found him with the shotgun. So you always want to be careful about saying, well, this is the guy that did it, because he's not been convicted, and I respect the process. But this is the guy that allegedly did the incident. But he's got 17 years in prison already, and he's probably looking maybe another 20. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Yeah. It could be up to 40 years if the process plays out.
Wow.
But I really would like the opportunity to say, tell me about your life. What happened, and what could we learn differently from it?
Yeah. What do you think his response would be?
I would say his family structure was probably not non-existent to poor.
Yeah, do you think he'd be open to talking to you?
Great question. I would actually love that opportunity. I probably would want to do it after the conviction, because I wouldn't want to mess the process up. Right. I don't think I ever will. I may write him a letter when he's in prison. And he'll have an opportunity to hear my victim statement. Yeah. And it's,
Interesting.
What was his initiative? What was he trying to do by taking all these vehicles?
His thing was to confuse the police as far as what vehicle he was driving to get away.
He made a bad choice.
Yeah. His opportunity was to get away at that point. And by confusing the police, and the police were very confused. And I get that, because they're saying, which car is, no, he's not in that car, he's in this car. And it was total confusion that night. Even, I can remember hearing the police officers, and they came right up, because they knew that there'd been a shooting at the house. But, I said right away, nope, nobody's been injured. And they says, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm sure. Nobody's been injured. Nobody's been killed. But it missed. When the slug, so we talked to the police, we gave them our statement, and the whole walkthrough. We never went in the house. And at the time I made the call, I was calling from the house, but I never looked around. So Chris and I came in about 2 hours later, and I says, the door had been left open. And I said, oh boy, I'll tell you, the dust really came in. And it turns out that we looked up and we saw a hole through a window in our. And so the slug of the shotgun went through the window and still embedded in the beam of our house. So I was, I'm pretty tall, and I was about 18 inches above my head between Christy and I. So the slug would hit us. Obviously, it was a slug. It was not a. Yeah. It would have killed us instantly.
Yeah.
Wow. It's probably good it wasn't like birdshot or buckshot.
I thought about that too. Exactly. Which would have been better, because if it would have been birdshot, I think I would have gotten a spray in the face. I really do. I couldn't see how I could get by without getting sprayed.
Yeah. Wild.
Because it was that close. But then I probably wouldn't have gotten killed though. And so I don't. That's a part of that whole what if process that you play in your minds, as far as what would you do in the situation. And the thing I asked myself was, what would I do differently? And I don't have a gun in the house, and I respect people that do. It's no big deal, but but for me, I went at time to go get a gun. And some people, well, you would have had a gun. If I go on the deck, I'm probably not going to carry a gun. I don't think it would have changed anything, and it probably would have escalated. The whole thing.
Yeah, at that moment, you're not trying to get into a gunfight.
Right. And if he's got a shotgun and I got a pistol, I'm probably going to lose that. It's not going to be a good combination there either. So it played out probably the best way it possibly could have.
We have a friend. I don't know if you know him, but Kelly Sparlin. He owns Rogue Protection Group. He's retired Navy SEAL, special forces, obviously, spent a lot of time behind a weapon, and he studies this kind of stuff, like the human brain and how it interacts to fear and combat and these kinds of situations.
The whole fight or flight.
The whole fight or flight thing. And he says you don't get a choice.
Yeah.
Like you don't get to choose
Right.
what happens. Your body does what your brain is going to do what it wants to do.
Right.
And you don't get to. So the fact that you guys were like, some people just maybe they fight or they freeze or they run, or I mean, he's actually one person I want to get on here, but he's a super smart guy. But it's interesting. Your brain just goes in, like you said, in super robot mode. It just
Right.
and it's just
The decisions you're processing you're taking input in, and you're trying to think, okay, what am I going to do next? And you're thinking of Christy. She's thinking of me. You're thinking of everything, trying to go in. And in the space of this 3 minutes, I don't think I've ever thought that much in that sort of time.
yeah.
And I never will again.
No, you won't. It's just,
Right.
You can't turn that on.
Right.
And that's one of the things that he talks about too, is like you can't train that.
Right.
And it's because there's no substitute for it. Like there's no way. He talks about his first gunfight. I mean, they work for months up to these deployments and to go on to these missions. And I mean, preparing and shooting and simulating these things. I mean, Lawton's a Marine. He understands how all that works. Like they train, well, maybe not. They don't train.
Not to that level.
Not to that level. I mean, but they have these. They call them workups, where they have these things before they go and deploy on these missions. And he got into his first gunfight, and the only thing he remembers is his buddy tapping him on the shoulder and being like, "Kelly, what are you doing? Get back in the fight!" Like he literally just stood there and froze. And I mean, he'd been working for months behind a weapon doing this stuff, and you don't get to choose. So it's interesting that your body went
Training. It's not like you're going to go practice folding letters and, have a gun under your couch cushion and practice now.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, I think you're right. I think you're lucky you didn't bring out a gun. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously he fired the warning shot, maybe closer than he intended.
Right.
But if he would have decided to go a different route with that because he's perceived you as a threat, it could be a different story.
Yeah.
And that's the part, I guess, and I put that in my victim statement. I really do have a gratitude for him because he could have killed us. I mean, on the deck, he had the slugs there to do it, and he wouldn't have any witnesses.
Yeah.
It could have easily just shot us both, and we wouldn't have anything to talk about.
Was he on drugs or?
I don't think he was. He didn't act. People have asked that question too. I don't think so. I've been around people obviously that are on drugs. He didn't act like it. He wanted to get out of there, and we had the truck that was able to get him out of there. We were the means to the end for him.
Right.
Yeah. Pretty wild.
I have a question about snowmobiles.
Let's switch gears. Lawton wants to talk about snowmobiles.
Well, I'm looking at the clock over here. I want to get it in.
Oh no, you're fine. Go for it.
I have
So-
a question too at some point, but
Okay.
That's how it originated, was snowmobile sales. Did I read that right?
We actually had in Sault Ste. Marie, we had a snowmobile dealership, and so we sold Scorpion and Polaris snowmobiles. And I had a morning paper out, and I would sometimes deliver my papers on a snowmobile. And we loved to ride, and all the time. And so I was regularly riding, and you could ride them to school.
Wow.
And so you could ride them on the streets during the I-500 snowmobile race, which is what I talked earlier, what my dad started. And so we had a great time on snowmobiles. And so a lot of stories with snowmobiles. And I was in Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout. And I loved all the things that went on for scouting as far as going out winter campouts and that type of thing with snowmobiles. And there it was 25 below zero, that type of thing. And the winter survival training. We had a big Air Force base. It was Kinchler Air Force Base. It was a SAC base, the Strategic Air Command, B-52. And they had actually get the Air Force personnel to come out and instruct us on for Explorer Post on cold weather survival work and that type of thing. And it was just a really good experience. So we snowmobile a lot, and I have 4 snowmobiles now, and we have a place at Diamond Lake, and I have 4 snowmobiles up there. So we love to go riding up there to Crater Lake and that type of thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask if it still is carried on and you get to ride, because it's all groomed trails, a lot of it up there, right?
It's yes. And but after a fresh snowfall, it's not groomed, and you're cutting your way through that type of thing. But we both Chris and I love to ride up there, and we just Crater Lake is probably, or Mount Bailey, climb up to 9,000 feet, and be able to see Roseburg, the ocean, Mount Shasta. You're just on top of the world, and the wind is howling up there. And it's just the ride down is actually the hardest part of being able to control the snowmobile so you don't flip it going down.
Yeah. My father-in-law sells snowmobiles in Sierra City, California, Ski-Doos. Yeah, so my wife grew up riding them. So every time we go home, if there's snow, like I usually get left behind now, watch the kids, but she goes off and rides. But I've gone enough times with them. And actually the last one I wrecked my first snowmobile, decided to follow my father-in-law up this hill. And I didn't realize because they have their body language and things when you're not supposed to follow the people that know what they're doing anymore. And I didn't pick up on that. So I made it about 3/4 of the way up this big hill, realized I wasn't going to make it, and the sled just started to turn and go down, and I looked down and just all these trees in front of me, and I didn't know, so I just jumped off, and it went into the trees and just...
It happens.
Yeah, that's what I'm told. I was hoping I wouldn't be on that list, but that's what they said. They were like, "You're all right. It's not a big deal."
Right.
Pulled it out of there. So.
Yep.
I just did a video on wintertime activities in Southern Oregon on YouTube, and snowmobiling is one of them. And I made it sound like I've been on snowmobiles before, but I've never been. But I want to do it really bad. So we went up to Diamond Lake last year for ice fishing, right around this time of year. Was it January or late January? Yeah. We went ice fishing, just Lawton and a couple of other buddies. And we're going to go back again. But I want to rent snowmobiles this time.
We have a cabin at Diamond Lake, so we love to go up there and because you have to snowmobile actually into the cabin. But a lot of times we just go for the day and ride. We keep the snowmobiles up at Diamond Lake, and so we just unload them at the beginning of the morning, ride all day, and put them back at night.
Yeah, it's beautiful up there.
It is. It's great fun.
Yeah,
relaxing.
Arctic Cat still? Is that what you ride?
I have 2 Yamahas and 2 Polarises. Okay. So the Yamahas are 4 cycles, and those are the ones I primarily ride.
Are they more of like the sporty one-person one, timber sled?
Actually, it's a difference. Mine's a sporty one-person, the fast sled, and Christie's is the two what they call a 2-up. It's for 2 passengers. And what's interesting, so many times we'll go up there and somebody's broken down. I mean, it never fails, and we end up bringing somebody back with us. And, it's rescuing somebody. It's a part when you're up to Crater Lake and that type of thing.
So you make them ride with your wife. Good job, Steve.
Well, yeah, she's had her greatest story is we had 4 people on her, 2 young kids and a mom, and the kids didn't want to ride with me as far as a strange guy, so they all stay with their mom. So there were 4 on one snowmobile, 4 people on one snowmobile, and just well, that's great. I'm on by myself. But
awesome.
I cut the trails.
Yeah, good. That's awesome.
Well, Daniel, especially, I know he's like way into his business cards, and we've got like really nice business cards. And I saw you at the 4-Way Foundation, the dinner, and you had a very special business card. And I just want you to be able to share that with these guys. I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So I've got my regular business card, but it's a You Matter card. And I started this. It's not my idea, but they sent out samples, and they sent out 30 of them. And I thought, I could make a difference. And so You Matter cards are something I've used. I get 10,000 of them printed at a time. That's the only, and I'll say, I'll give to people, it's You Matter. And the first thing they always do is they look on the back side of it.
Because I literally just did it right before you said it.
I watched you do it. It's like, okay. Yeah. And, they always look because they think it's going to be something about your business and that type of thing. But there's only 2 words on it. It's You Matter. Yeah. And so many times I think people, they miss that opportunity. And so it could be a person that's on the street. It could be a homeless person. And I'll have some conversation with them. And usually
Can I leave them in here?
You bet.
Okay.
I got tons of them. They're specific.
10,000, actually.
Yeah, 10,000 of them, yes. And so, to students. And so I brought them to the 4-Way Foundation and suggested to people that they give them to the people that are they run across in life. And my wife has one on her mirror at home. I think that's so true in today's times where people feel like they don't matter. And you never know. That person could look like they're super successful and everything's going their way, but you really don't know a person. There's that, I think it's out of Cleveland Clinic. They have this video, and it talks about, it's a really powerful YouTube video, and they show these people walking, and then they'll have a balloon above their head, just was diagnosed, was told they have cancer. Or another person, they just lost a baby. Or another person, they just completed a marathon in a good way or bad way. And you never know what people are going through in their life. And so the thing about the You Matter card is, it happens to me. And, there was a person downtown in Grants Pass. I wrote an article about it but it was he was on the street. It was on by the post office on 7th Street or on 6th Street, and he came up to me and started talking to me, and I didn't give him a Matter card. I didn't probably give him the time of day, and so then a couple times later he came up to me again, and we had a conversation, but I couldn't really tell what he wanted. It was just kind of an awkward conversation, and then the next time he saw me, he yelled at the top of his lungs, "Steve Roe, you're a fraud." And I can't even do that with this loud because of the fact that it would blow the speakers. But it was that loud. And so people anywhere around, I was really embarrassed by this. Mm-hmm. And so I went in the post office and I went down the other way of F Street and went around the block. Yeah. And I avoided him. And then it happened about maybe a week later. And same thing. This "Steve Roe, you're a fraud." And so then I was at the corner of 6th and G, waiting for the light to change, and he came up to me, and I could see him coming up to me, and I thought, well, this is not going to go well. It's not going to end well. And he says, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I says, "Really, I don't." He says, "I'm such and such a person," and we were in Toastmasters together. And he says, the thing I really remember that from him is he says, "Steve, I wasn't looking for your money. I wanted your attention." And since that time, I had this conversation with him, and he's in Foundry Village now. I've stayed in contact with him, and so we had conversation with him, and good conversation on the street. And I says, what could I get you? What would you like for? It was about Christmas time, and he says, "I like harmonica." Mm-hmm. So I got him a harmonica, and then Christy and I were walking down to G Street for dinner, and he comes up to us, and he says, "Can I play a song on my harmonica?" Mm-hmm. And he did, and he's really good on the harmonica. Mm-hmm. And I just, it's again that you don't know what's happened to that person. And, he went through some personal things, struggles in his life, and his family fell apart for him. And, but he's still a human being. Mm-hmm. And it really made a profound impact on me about that whole story.
Where did your passion for mental health and all that stuff come from?
Well, there goes the whole day. That whole thing. So I grew up in Sault Ste. Marie, and we moved there in the 5th grade. And it didn't start right away, but I was one of these youth that didn't fit right in. I was an odd duck. There's no doubt about it. Just awkward. And a lot of kids played hockey in the Sioux, and I never was good in sports. Still am not good in sports. But anyway.
Dodged a shotgun slug, so you must be pretty
Have you tried pickleball?
I need to do something. Yeah, I'm on the treadmill a lot. I work out regularly on the treadmill, and but anyway, there was a lot of bullying that went on. And it usually was primarily one person, but a group of people. And I never had that student that came up to me and says, "You matter." Mm-hmm. I was the person that didn't exist.
Right.
And I researched many, many times in the library. I'd go down and check out the library, because we didn't have the internet back then, and how to commit suicide. Mm-hmm. And, kind of would figure out a way. And then I looked at the impact it would have on my family. And so, okay. I was active in Boy Scouts, as I mentioned before, and Boy Scouts was a good, safe place for me. That probably saved my life, too. My family obviously did. But school, people think, oh, you're reasonably smart. My grade point average was a D+. That's not B+, D+, mm-hmm. below C level, as I like to say. And because I had such a low self-esteem. And so when I went to college, though, I decided I was going to go downstate for college in Michigan. And I did well in college. Mm-hmm. I graduated in honors. I got out 2 degrees, and I got out in 3 years, and I thought, okay, I'm maybe not as stupid as I think. And so this number of years goes by, and I didn't realize the toll that it took on me. So I'm 66 now. When I was 48, I went to the Center for Creative Leadership in Colorado Springs, and it was a week-long course, and they evaluate you in different circumstances, how you lead and everything. At the end of the week, they meet with you, and they says, here's what we see with you, and here's some opportunities for you for growth. And this guy said, he was actually a psychologist, and he says, I think you'd benefit from mental health counseling. I says, what do you mean? And he says, no, I don't know what it is. He I see some PTSD in your background. And so I went back and I called Roy Vineyard, who was the CEO of Asante. I was on the board of Asante. And I know what you're thinking of mental health is, but you don't want to talk about it. And I was one of those people that you're just embarrassed to say that somebody said you should reach out. If I would have got, my primary care doctor said, you got cancer, I'd go to an oncologist, no problem. I'd broadcast it, no problem. If I had a cardiac condition, psychiatry, no. And so I went and saw this Dr. Phillips in Medford at Rogue Regional, and he really a great doctor. He's a psychiatrist. He's still alive. He's like 95 now. And he changed my life. And I never realized from our employees, but at the dealership, I would lead by fear. And I was a real jerk as a boss. And some people probably still say I am. I don't know. But, I would get really angry, and I would scream at people. But then I saw, okay, and that was my reaction to it. And once he did it, not with medication, he did it with a lot of listening, and he gave me some exercises to do as far as relating with other people, and it worked. And so for me, that was something I continue onward. And so student mental health is something I'm working on. Actually, I'm trying to work on a project right now in Sault Ste. Marie, and I called them maybe about 2 weeks ago, and I called this Chippewa County Foundation, which I'm on the board of Four-Way Community Foundation as well. I'm going off actually in this end of this month because of term limits. But I would like to set up a fund with Christy and I for to help student mental health, and it would be a perpetual fund that goes on after we pass on. But the other thing I want to contribute is a King Charles Spaniel in their counseling department. I don't know if they'll want one, but it's interesting. I've got a session set up, a Zoom call with the superintendent of schools from Sault Ste. Marie, as well as the principal of the high school, which is where the bullying took place. And I think it's at 10 o'clock next Wednesday.
Wow.
And I don't know how this is going to turn out, but my hope is that, they can, I think for me, if I would have had that therapy dog in school.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered trying to reach out or contact the guy who caused you all this problem through high school?
I did, and it's a very unusual last name, and so so I can find it, and I found it, and then the next thing where I found it though was in the police reports, and it was domestic violence.
Oh, great!
So I thought, why bother? And maybe there'll be that time. I don't know. I've never been back for a school reunion, and I got my 50th coming up in a few years. Whether I'll go back for that or not, I don't know. I kind of doubt it, but I don't know. But I see this opportunity to visit, because one of the things that happened to me is I had an English teacher, and she was a really good friend. And so we did something on a Sunday, and I just happened to mention to her that I was getting bullied in school. And so the next morning, I was in a class, and I got paged to the principal's office. So I went down to the principal's office, and I don't think the principal handled it exactly real well, because what happened was I told him the whole story, everything that was going on. I thought, okay, this would be a good way to go. Well, it didn't go well, because then the bullying even got worse, because the superintendent, or the principal, then went to that student and kind of narked me out, and so I just found a different way home on the streets. And so it was not a case of, I think they could have done a better job in that way. And I think we've come a long ways. We got a long ways to go.
50 years ago, that situation was handled much differently than it is nowadays.
Right.
It was more like, toughen up, Steve, get some thick skin type of thing.
And Christy, my wife, was a first grade school teacher at Allendale Elementary, and we have many conversations about bullying and mental health, and she's there for me. I mean, she is she's a real compassionate person, and it's just amazing. Yeah.
I don't know anybody who's more compassionate than you, Steve. So
no, she's much more compassionate, Yeah.
Yeah. No, we have come a long way, and it's evolving. Lawton and I have a buddy who killed himself recently, and we're not sure why.
Right.
So it's it's still pretty fresh, but it is definitely disturbing. Mental health is definitely a huge issue in this country, and you're right. It's something that people don't want to talk about. People who have mental health, or just people who are, it's just, they just want to avoid that topic altogether, and it's not good.
No, I was talking to the Chippewa County Foundation, and where I went to school, they have like a freshman for one school, and then the upperclassmen another. And a student a few years ago committed suicide right in the path with a gun in front of the other students.
Yeah.
And so my thinking is whatever I can do in my life, and then beyond that, as far as to make it, I think so. I think the thing I can do is treating people with compassion today, and listen to their stories. And then from the next step then forward is, after I'm gone, is to find ways to help people with funds and that type of thing. You can do some with money, but I think I can do a lot more, with a therapy dog, for example. And for me, the therapy dog, when I put it, it's not about me at that point, it's about the dog.
Yeah.
And that really helps that situation. And I think, for example, with the person, I'm sorry to hear about your friend. That is really, it's so difficult. And, there's the impact on the friends as well as the family and that type of thing. And I can picture where that person's come from, though. I really can.
Yeah. It's a long story with this person, but a long backstory about, why we think he did it, but it's a mystery because it still doesn't make sense.
Right.
And I don't think it will ever, because we won't ever have that clarity, but I guess I wish there were more people out there like you who were compassionate about this. I think that's what we need in today's world, is people who care about other people, care about their stories and where they've come from and all that kind of stuff. And so I commend you for that. Dan was working with Robin and I just on some business planning stuff a few weeks ago, and he asked this question about, what do you want your legacy to be? And what's funny is I thought of you at that time, because it's clear that you, with all the work that you do, you are going to leave behind a legacy, and you're setting an example for people in the future. And I'm honored to know you, and so I appreciate you so much, and I really appreciate you being here.
I appreciate this opportunity to share.
Yeah. And so I have one last question for you.
Sure.
And really, this is a test to make sure that Christy watches the whole thing, so don't tell her. Okay?
Okay.
You've talked a lot about her in the podcast, and you talked about her a lot in the interview form. How did you meet her? What does she mean to you? If you can summarize that. I mean, you take as much time as you want.
Yeah.
But she clearly is who you seek counsel from. She's who inspires you. Mm-hmm. Just talk about that for a second.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So Dan and Marcia Durbin, Dan was he's a retired major in the Oregon State Police, and they were kind of very involved in Christy's life. And so they met. I was married before. I have two daughters, and so they're out of the area and doing well, and still stay in contact with them on a regular basis. But I was divorced, and I was one of these people that swore I was never going to get married again. It was just one of those things, and that's okay. And so anyway, Marcia Durbin, I was walking across the lot, and she says to Lori, my sister, "Who's that?" And she said, "That's my brother." And so she says, "Okay." And she put that in the back of her mind. And then a few days later, which nothing happens by accident with Marcia and Dan, but they said, "Hey, let's go out for pizza." And so Christy happened to be there, and and actually my daughters were there too. And so it was Dan and Marcia and Lori, my sister. We all went over for pizza, and then afterwards started talking and started dating. And Christy's a marvelous. She did not have she was working for the Ken Roberts Company at that time, which is doing editing, that type of thing. But it's been studied to be a teacher, had a degree. And I says, over time, we started obviously getting closer to one another, and I said, "Why don't you go back to being your dream as a teacher?" And so she listened to that, and she did go back to and she's been a marvelous teacher. The students that have her thing, just a real benefit with her. And she's got this kind, compassionate heart she's a very responsible person, but the biggest thing about her is just her caring of her heart. She's an amazing individual for the care that she shows her students as well as adults, but where it really comes through is with the kids. And she's for that person that's the underdog. And so I think there's a little bit of that conversation where you saw myself, I see that fifth grade student with Christy as a teacher. And if Christy would have been that teacher, I think that wouldn't have happened. You know, it's Christy works with students that are grieving, that have lost loved ones, and she really cares about them. Just has and she cares about me, and we care for each other. And so when you have that incident like the shooting and that type of thing, we've had a lot of shared experiences together. Obviously challenging situations, but also mainly really great situations.
Yeah. Cool.
Did that help?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's cool. I mean, I think all of us in this room are blessed with very awesome wives, and great relationships and beautiful children. And so it's just, I enjoy hearing that. So
one of the things to finish up with is also the power of the hearth. And the hearth is something I've been involved with. Started with Mark Yaconelli in Ashland, Oregon. We have the Grants Pass Hearth. There's been about 20 of them now. And they're quarterly events where people have stories. I think just telling our stories, the good and the bad, and the challenges of people, of getting, I always look at an obituary and I says, man, I wished I would have known that about that person. That would have been a great story to tell. And so I think it's really good to find out when people are living what those stories are, about how they made a difference in the lives of other people.
that's one of the reasons why I want to do this.
Yeah.
It's everybody has a story.
Right.
And I mean, obviously I want to talk to people like you who are, that a lot of people know. And of course, but everybody has them, and they're all interesting one way or the other if you can get them to open up about it.
Right.
And it's been one of the great pleasures about doing this is hearing people's stories and where they come from and what's happened to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No,
when's the next hearth going to be?
It's January 19th, I believe. And the power of it's going to be, or it's about a theme. And so there's 6 people that tell their stories. Connections is going to be the theme of it. But it's 6 people that tell a 10-minute story about themselves. And then there's music involved as well. And just the good feeling. It's held at Bethany Presbyterian Church, but it's not part of a church service in any way. It's just a location to have it. But just hearing the good stories that happen with people, and wow, yeah.
Yeah, I think I was on the email list for that. Was there an email that went out?
There was probably me, yes. I sent out the emails, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen them in a while, probably COVID or...
Exactly. We haven't had them since about 2020 because of COVID, but we had one earlier this month, I guess, maybe last month, about a month ago anyway, and it was successful, and it was about the theme of that one was the mountains we climb.
Oh, that'd been a good one.
It was really, really good. Yeah, you can actually go, use a GP Hearth or Hearth GP Hearth, I think it is. Anyway, the recording's there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you so much for doing this,
Thank
Steve.
you.
Thanks, Steve.
You bet.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for all of you.
All right.
Okay.
Well, that's a wrap.
Okay.